Now, when I was doing the research for the Flash concept, I came across some Superman information, putting together parts of all the continuity and so forth. And I realized there's a loophole here. If you went back to the 70s, 80s, it's going back a bit, they talked about the secret history of the L family, in which an ancestor to Jor-El came up with something that was roughly a Phantom Zone projector, but not quite. And I dawned on this that you could actually do an entire secret origin or history of Daxam and Krypton. In other words, the origin of Daxam. But I also realized, too, when John Byrne redid Superman series, he had Jor-El's fortress on top of the old lab where this projector was. And I just realized that in the John Byrne series, the robots were actually repairing the fortress of Jor-El as fast as they could while it was falling apart. And what if, by just fluke chance, this ancient projector had tripped? See my point? It would have actually, in my story, would have created two different alternate Earths, or so not quite Phantom Zone, but a sort of a gateway place between Krypton and where Daxam was, which is a story I'll have to get into at a longer point, that's another point. But what I realized was I could bring back Jor-El and Lara in two different storylines. The first one, of course, Jor-El would show up on a more peaceful type planet closer to Krypton, and of course he'd meet some people there as well. Lara would be separated and be sent to a more harsher type place. And if you remember your history of Krypton, there actually was a moon that went missing. This would basically be what happened to that moon, and its planet's also a little secondary moon as well. That they got somehow, when Krypton first made the transport over to Daxam, they got sucked into this null void. And of course, Krypton explodes, the fortress falls apart, this projector trips and splits the mansion in half, which gives you Jor-El many years later. Okay. Now Jor-El, all enough, has assumed the mantle of scientist/farmer in this new sort of world where there's no stars. And these are based some of his Kelex that he's modified. Kelex, if you don't remember, is actually the robot that actually was working on his fortress. Now these would become some of the allies he comes across with. I won't go into detail so much about them. And this wonderful character here I refer to as Daxam. And I translated Daxam as Truth Seeker. He's actually the first person with the L family way back when who actually came up with this transport to the world of Daxam. And they was made fun of, so he got exiled. Another alien ally of Jor-El. And of course, another Kelex, and also a new Kelex, which is more of a guardian type thing. So in the Jor-El world, everything's rather peaceful and calm. But let's go over to the Lara world, the dark moon, the darker world that she falls into. Now, Lara, of course, has to become a stronger woman. She becomes more of a warrior. And yes, that is a form of an eradicator in her hands. And one of the things that John Byrne did too also back in his storytelling was he had the cloning pods. Well, I always thought Clark needed a sister, so I came up with Ura. So basically, when this beam tripped, that pod actually went with her, and of course the pod hatched. So this is a Kryptonian born in a null void, some slightly different powers, but basically Superman's sister. Once again, I can get into details, but these are some of the allies that Lara would have in that world. This would be called Breed. And what these are going back to the original days of Daxam, when Daxam was still mostly just a colony of Krypton. The Dominion at the time was actually doing scientific experiments, and when they didn't like him, they tossed him into this void. This is also a character I call Daxel and Brainy. These go back to the origins of Daxel. Because in this null void, time pretty much doesn't exist. And if you notice, one of the things they do with the red circles, which also ties into the Legion of the future storyline, that we'll be talking about some other point. The reason why I did this is I want to have continuity with my storylines as well. So that's our early allies. And of course you'd have other characters in this moon. You'd have some weird animals, some weird objects, aliens. You'd have some new villains as well. And there's a whole series of new villains for Lara to deal with. And the concept behind this was that it was a storyline I called The Gift. And what the story actually involved was the Green Lantern Corps comes across this bizarre cosmetic field in space near the planet of Daxam. Roughly halfway between Daxam and Krypton was. And when they go and investigate, they realize that this old artifact on Daxam has Trigger, which has been trying to reconnect to Krypton, which doesn't exist. Long story short, they actually managed to get this thing to open up the portal, and lo and behold, halfway between Krypton you have this planet, one that Jor-El is on, and this dark moon that Lara's on. And the whole concept of the gift was Al Jordan gets to go get Superman, brings him to this place, and he gets to meet his father and mother and his sister for the first time. Keeping in mind, too, Uriah's character also comes back in the Legion of the Future storyline. So that's it for this storyline. See you for the next pitch.